Imagine walking into a small-town diner, just hoping for a quiet meal. But instead of peace, the air is thick with laughter, cruel, sharp, and directed at one man. He's big, black, and sitting alone at the counter, quietly stirring his coffee. A group of loud young men mock his weight, his skin, even the way he breathes. The room chuckles. The waitress looks away, and no one dares to speak up. But what they don't know is that the man they're mocking isn't just anyone. Behind those calm, steady eyes hides a past that will silence the entire diner, a truth they'll never forget. The diner smelled of fried bacon, stale coffee, and something that tried too hard to be warm but instead felt heavy with judgment. Saturday nights in this little southern town were always the same. Families squeeze into booths, truckers at corner tables, kids running between sticky floors, and a handful of men too loud for their own good. At the counter sat Marcus, a tall, heavy-set black man in his late 40s. His shoulders were broad, but his posture carried a kind of weariness, the kind that comes from more than just a long day. His dark hoodie looked worn, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen more than anyone else in the room could imagine. He held his coffee mug in both hands, almost like it was the only thing grounding him in the moment. Behind him, a group of 5 young men, all in their early 20s, filled a booth, boots on the seats, baseball caps turned backwards. Their voices cut through the room. The leader of the group, a tall, wiry guy with mean blue eyes, leaned forward with a smirk. "Hey, look at big boy over there," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Bet he eats 3 burgers just to get warmed up." The booth erupted with laughter. Marcus didn't flinch. He stirred his coffee slowly, clink of spoon against mug, steady and unbothered. Another one chimed in. "Man, look at his arms. You think he can even lift them? Or does his fat just hold him up?" More laughter. A couple at the corner booth glanced at Marcus, then quickly looked back down at their plates, pretending not to notice. The waitress, a young white woman in her early 30s, froze mid-step. Her hand clutched the coffee pot tighter, her jaw set, but she didn't speak. Instead, she turned away, refilling another customer's cup. The laughter grew louder. One of the gang whistled mockingly. "Hey, big guy, careful. Don't break that stool. Looks like it's crying under you already." This time, even the cook behind the counter chuckled, not because it was funny, but because it was easier than stepping in. Marcus finally looked up. His gaze swept the diner, slow and steady. His dark eyes landed briefly on each face. The giggling gang, the embarrassed onlookers, the waitress who wouldn't meet his gaze. And then he went back to his coffee, sipping it as though the entire world had gone silent around him. But inside Marcus's chest, something stirred. Memories. Painful, sharp, and buried deep. He remembered Afghanistan. The sound of bullets ripping through night air. The weight of his rifle in his hands. The smell of dirt, blood, and sweat. He remembered being called a hero once. He remembered the flag draped across coffins. The faces of brothers he'd lost. The nights he stayed awake, staring at ceilings, because sleep was too dangerous. And here he was now, mocked, belittled, reduced to nothing but a punchline for boys who had never even been tested. His spoon clinked against the mug again. The sound was soft, but sharp enough to cut through the laughter for just a moment. The leader of the gang noticed, leaning back in his booth. "What's the matter, big man? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe it's stuck in a milkshake?" he sneered, grinning at his friends. The diner roared again. Marcus set his spoon down, slowly, carefully. Then, with the same measured calm, he pushed his coffee mug aside and folded his massive hands on the counter. His broad shoulders straightened, and for the first time, he turned fully to face the gang. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's voice was low, gravelly, and carried the weight of storms. "You boys think you're funny, don't you?" The gang smirked. The leader puffed up his chest, ready to fire another insult. But Marcus didn't blink. He held their eyes, one by one. "You see this?" he said, tapping the band of an old, worn bracelet on his wrist. Faded, scratched, almost invisible. This was given to me in Kabul. 2003. I wore it every day, so I wouldn't forget the brothers who didn't come home. The diner fell silent. Even the fry cook stopped mid-flip, spatula in hand. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his voice steady but heavy with fire. You laugh at me like I'm weak, like I'm nothing. But while you were safe at home, drinking beers and playing tough, I was out there, carrying bodies, fighting wars you wouldn't survive a day in. The gang shifted uncomfortably in their booth. Their smirks began to falter. Marcus leaned closer, his gaze locked on the leader. Call me fat, call me slow, but never forget this. I'm still here, because I earned it. And boys like you wouldn't last 5 minutes where I've been. The diner stayed frozen. The waitress's eyes widened, her hand trembling against the coffee pot. Families looked at Marcus with a mix of shock and something else, respect. The leader of the gang opened his mouth to laugh again, but no sound came out. His throat was dry. His hands fidgeted against the table. Marcus straightened back up, turned his coffee, and picked up his mug again. Calm, silent, but the atmosphere in the diner had shifted completely. For the first time that night, the laughter was gone. The diner, once buzzing with rowdy laughter, had turned into something else entirely. The air felt heavier now, the kind of weight people only feel at funerals or during confessions. Forks had stopped clinking. The hum of the ceiling fan was suddenly too loud. And every single eye was locked on Marcus. The gang sat stiff in their booth. Their leader, the wiry one with mean blue eyes, shifted uncomfortably under Marcus's steady stare. He wasn't used to being challenged. Not here, not in this diner, not in front of his friends. His smirk wavered, but pride wouldn't let him back down. Uffed! He finally scoffed, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a choke. Man, you expect us to believe that? You? A Marine? Please. His buddies chuckled nervously, clinging to his words like lifelines. But their laughter was thin, uneasy. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He set his coffee mug down again and rolled up his sleeves slowly. The diner gasped as a thick, faded tattoo came into view. The globe and anchor of the United States Marine Corps, etched deep into his skin. Old, worn, but unmistakable. The leader's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Marcus leaned forward just slightly, his voice calm, deliberate, and cutting through the room like a blade. You boys think respect is something you're owed. But respect? It's earned. Out there in the desert, I watched 19-year-olds lay down their lives for each other without a second thought. And you sit here mocking strangers for laughs. He paused, letting the silence burn. That's not strength. That's weakness. The waitress, who had been frozen at the edge of the counter, suddenly found herself blinking back tears. She had seen plenty of drunks, loudmouths, and troublemakers in this diner. But this was different. The leader of the gang shifted again, but his hands betrayed him. They trembled ever so slightly on the table. His buddies exchanged nervous glances. One of them muttered under his breath, "Man, maybe we should just drop it." But pride is a dangerous thing. The leader slammed his hand on the table, forcing a brittle laugh. Tattoo don't mean nothing. Anybody can ink themselves up. Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his wallet. For a moment, the gang stiffened, thinking he was pulling something else. But Marcus only slid a small, folded piece of paper across the counter toward the waitress. She picked it up with hesitant hands, unfolding it. Her eyes widened. It was an old, creased photograph, Marcus in uniform, standing beside his unit, dusty desert at their backs. His face was younger, but the same unshakable eyes stared out from the photo. The waitress's throat tightened as she passed the photo back. "It's real," she whispered, loud enough for the diner to hear. The tension in the room shifted again. This time, it was the gang that felt the walls closing in. Their leader's cheeks flushed red, a cocktail of embarrassment and anger. Marcus sipped his coffee, as though none of this mattered, as though he hadn't just cracked open a silence that pressed against everyone's chest. Finally, one of the younger men in the booth, not the leader, but the one with softer eyes and less swagger, leaned forward. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. Were you really there? In the war?" Marcus set the mug down, looking at the young man. His expression softened, but his voice carried the same weight. "Yeah, I was there. I lost brothers there. I've carried men, out of fire you wouldn't believe. I've seen courage and I've seen fear. And right now, he glanced at the leader. I see fear. The leader clenched his jaw, fist tight, but he couldn't bring himself to respond. His friend shifted uncomfortably, the bravado leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. Marcus leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. You boys picked the wrong man to laugh at. You want to make a show? Fine. But here's your lesson. Don't ever mistake silence for weakness. And don't ever mock a man when you don't know the battles he's fought. The diner remained dead silent. The families who had been pretending not to hear now looked at Marcus with awe. The waitress stood straighter, pride flickering in her eyes. And for the first time, the gang had nothing to say. The diner's quiet didn't last long. Embarrassment is a poison, and for men like the gang leader, it never sits quietly in the veins. His pride had taken a direct hit, and he wasn't about to let Marcus have the last word. Not in front of his crew, not in front of an entire diner full of strangers. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling plates and silverware. You think you're tough because you were a Marine? Man, those days are over. Look at you now, fat, old, washed up. You ain't scaring nobody. His voice cracked at the end, betraying the tremor beneath his rage. But he covered it with another harsh laugh. His buddies chuckled along, but their laughter was hollow, forced, like they were clinging to the last scraps of his authority. Marcus didn't move. He sat still, arms folded, his gaze fixed. His calmness was unsettling. It made the leader's rage look small, childish, almost desperate. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice low, but carrying across the room like distant thunder. You want to know what scary looks like? The diner leaned in. Marcus's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the calm mask slipped. His jaw tightened, his voice roughened, and he spoke with the weight of a man reliving hell. Scary is being 20 years old and hearing mortar fire all night, praying it doesn't land on your brother's tents. Scary is carrying a kid, barely old enough to shave, back to the med tent while he begs you not to let him die. Scary is writing letters to families, telling them their sons were heroes, when you know they never got the chance to live their lives. The words hung heavy. You could hear people swallowing hard, the scrape of a chair shifting uncomfortably. Even the waitress gripped her notepad with trembling fingers. The leader's smirk faltered. He tried to laugh, but the sound was brittle. Whatever, man, sounds like a sob story. Nobody cares about your war. The diner gasped. A father at the far booth shook his head in disgust. A mother pulled her child closer, as though shielding them from the ugliness of the comment. Marcus didn't lash out. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on the counter, and locked eyes with the leader. You don't care now, but you would have cared then, because men like you wouldn't have lasted a week where I was. Out there, without your buddies, without your cheap laughs, without a safe place to hide, you have begged men like me to protect you. And I would have, because that's what we did. We protected everyone, even the ones who didn't deserve it. The leader's jaw worked furiously, but no words came out. His friends stared at Marcus, their expressions shifting, from loyalty to doubt, from doubt to shame. One of them muttered under his breath, "Damn, he's right." That was the breaking point. The leader shoved back his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. He stood, puffing out his chest, trying to reclaim the dominance he had lost. You think you can talk down to me in front of everybody? You don't know who I am, old man. Marcus finally stood too, and for the first time, the room saw his true size. He wasn't just a fat guy they mocked. He was broad, solid, towering when he straightened up to his full height. His presence filled the space, his shadow stretching over the booth like a warning. The leader stumbled a half-step back before catching himself. Marcus's voice dropped to a near growl. I don't need to know who you are. I already know what you are. A coward, hiding behind insults and noise. Men like you only pick fights when you think you've already won. But life doesn't work that way. The tension in the room coiled tighter. One wrong move, and it would snap. Then Marcus did something nobody expected. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small chain, his old dog tags. The metal clinked softly as he set them down on the counter. These don't make me a hero. They don't make me invincible. but they mean I've lived through things you can't even imagine. And I promise you this." His eyes locked with the leader's. "If you push me any further, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." The diner was dead silent again. The leader swallowed hard, his bravado cracking, his fists clenched, but his feet betrayed him. He didn't step forward. He stayed rooted, staring at the dog tags, at Marcus, at the weight of everything he represented. His buddies? They were already shrinking in their seats, wishing they could vanish. And for the first time, the leader had to decide, double down on his pride or back away from the storm standing right in front of him. The diner's air was electric, like the moment right before a storm splits the sky. Every eye was locked on the two men. Marcus, calm but unshakable, and the gang leader, trembling beneath the weight of his own pride. The leader's throat bobbed as he swallowed. For a moment, it seemed like he might back down. His fists loosened. His shoulders dropped an inch. But then, someone in his crew whispered just loud enough to hear, "Yo, don't let him punk you like that, man." And just like that, the spark reignited. The leader snarled, pushing past the uncertainty. He leaned forward, jabbing a finger at Marcus's chest. "You think you can embarrass me in front of everybody? Nah, man. I don't care if you were in the Marines. You're nothing now. Just a washed-up has been." The words didn't sting Marcus. If anything, they made him stronger. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, he glanced at the finger jabbing at him, and then slowly looked back into the leader's eyes. In a voice like steel wrapped in velvet, Marcus replied, "Son, you should move your hand." The diner collectively held its breath. The leader hesitated, but his pride was louder than his common sense. He pressed his finger harder into Marcus's chest. "What if I don't?" Marcus stood taller, his frame casting a shadow that swallowed the smaller man whole. He didn't shove, didn't swing. He simply leaned in close, his voice low and lethal. The kind of voice that comes from a man who stared death in the face and walked away. "Then I'll teach you what real fear feels like." The leader tried to laugh it off, but it cracked into something hollow. He shoved Marcus. Hard. The sound of the shove echoed, plates rattling on nearby tables. But Marcus didn't move. He was a wall, solid, unshaken. The shove had been nothing. And when Marcus stepped forward, just a single heavy step, the leader stumbled back too. His tough guy mask shattered, and his crew, they saw it. They saw their leader fold under pressure. One of them muttered, "Yo, chill, man. He ain't playing." The waitress, voice trembling, called out from behind the counter, "Sir, maybe it's best if you and your friends leave now." But the leader's pride refused. He turned red, his face twisted with frustration and shame. He grabbed a glass on the table and hurled it at Marcus. The room gasped. Time slowed. The glass flew, but Marcus's reflexes were faster. With a swift motion, he caught it midair. The crowd erupted in disbelief. Gasps, murmurs. A man even clapped once in shock. Marcus set the glass down gently on the counter. Didn't even look at it. His eyes never left the leader's. That was it. The balance of power had flipped entirely. Marcus didn't need to throw a punch. Didn't need to raise his voice. His composure was the weapon. His silence the hammer. The leader's chest heaved, but his courage was gone. His crew stared at him with wide eyes, their loyalty hanging by a thread. Finally, one of them stood up and said quietly, "Yo, let's go. This ain't worth it." But the leader, he wasn't ready to admit defeat. His pride was bleeding too badly. He looked around the diner, searching for support, for anything that could save face. Instead, he found nothing but glares from the waitress, from the families, from every single person in the room. The truth was written all over their faces. He'd lost. He'd already lost. But the question was, would he walk away peacefully? Or would he make one last desperate move that could change everything? The diner was frozen in silence. The leader's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. His crew had already lost faith, but he wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. He clenched his fists, teeth grinding. "Nah, I'm not done." The room tensed. The waitress gasped, clutching the counter. Families shielded their children, bracing for a fight. But Marcus? He didn't move, didn't blink. His calm was unnerving. Like a lion waiting for the right moment, the leader lunged forward, swinging a fist with every ounce of rage he had left. The crowd screamed, but in a flash, Marcus shifted his weight, sidestepping with effortless precision. His hand clamped around the leader's wrist, twisting it with controlled force. The leader yelped in pain, dropping to one knee. Marcus didn't hurt him. Not really, just enough to stop him cold. He leaned down, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "I fought in places where men twice your size beg for mercy. You think you scare me? You don't even scare yourself." The diner fell completely silent. The leader's face drained of color. His crew stood frozen, their eyes wide. No one dared step in. Not a single one. Marcus released him, letting the man stumble back, clutching his wrist. But Marcus didn't give him the dignity of turning away. He stood tall, his presence towering, his dog tags glinting in the neon light of the diner. Finally, when the gang muttered, "Man, let's just go," the leader, humiliated and broken, scrambled to his feet. His pride was in pieces, and the weight of the room's judgment crushed him harder than Marcus's grip ever could. Without another word, he stormed toward the door. His crew followed, their tough guy act stripped away, nothing left but shame trailing behind them. The door slammed. Silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the entire diner erupted, clapping, cheering, even whistling. The waitress rushed forward, tears in her eyes. "Sir, thank you. I've never seen anything like that." Marcus simply gave a small nod. He didn't smile, didn't boast. He just placed a few bills on the counter, enough to cover his meal, and then some, and quietly said, "Keep the change. And remember, respect is free. But disrespect? That'll cost you." As he walked out into the night, the crowd watched him go, not as a fat man, not as someone to mock, but as a warrior, a protector, a Marine whose strength came not from violence, but from discipline. And the leader? That night became a story he could never escape, a reminder burned into his pride, that the loudest bullies are the weakest, and true power never needs a shout. Marcus didn't need revenge. He was a revenge. White heavy checkmarked the end.